release days. That was a discussion in years past. I personally like it for two reasons. One, we never know what the weather's like in our buildings, and since our buildings are not air conditioned, I think it helps out. But also, too, it gives the kids to get acclimated to the schools, and also the time for our teachers and staff to get acclimated and spend some time to prepare for our students. But that being said, we typically go through our little learning curve at the beginning of the year, typically with our bus schedules. As we know, there's the phenomenon of the first day of school with our first day pictures. We love that parents are taking the time, but that does impact our bus schedules. And it's also collaborating with Amity because, again, the times that they're leaving, pictures taken, and so that takes a week or so. In addition to that, as we shared in previous board meetings, we have a new pickup called Pick My Kids, or Pick My Kid. Again, the intention of that, when that app was first created, was to really have a smooth transition for students to leave a school and for parents to come in orderly. There's been a secondary gain with the Pick My Kid app, which is to create another mitigating factor with regards to safety. So instead of many people coming in or coming to the school out of their cars, it alleviates that. We are still working out some kinks with that because of technology. Right now we're using our Hvac, which is our mobile hotspot. Sometimes it goes off and on, but we're waiting for some equipment so we could establish a access point outside, and hopefully that will be coming sooner than later. But looking forward to having that and have that run smoothly. In addition to the mitigating factors, you may recall at the last board meeting I shared, in my mind and my lens, the way I've been looking at things, especially with our experience, is two parallel roads with safety and security. One is the health aspect to it, and one is the security aspect. Another mitigating factor that we established are our school security officers. I have to say they've been a great members of our community, addition members of our community, and I have to credit the board. Maybe it wasn't in retrospect not a choice that you were thinking, but because of the decision of the board and when you made it, it allowed us to jump on making and interviewing people quickly. Subsequently, as you may have seen in the newspaper, many districts had followed the same suit. Some actually have decided that prior to this board's decision, but I think it allowed us to jump on interview process, getting our staff trained, and we were fortunate to have 4 full-time security officers hired and 1 part-time. Again, I have to say, Mr. Gray and I shared this at the building ground safety and security meeting. I think we've hit home runs with the people that we've hired. They've been great asset so far to our district. And unlike in years past, we're again getting normal to less restrictions. All our schools have had their open houses thus far. That again, we've asked our SSOs to attend, not so much for safety, but for parents to get to see them, not only to see what was written up in their weekly newsletter, but in addition to get to see them. So we've been very fortunate, and other school events have been popping up, and there's a great vibe going in the schools. At the last board meeting, we extended our thanks to the custodians and supervisors of our facilities for their hard work in getting our schools ready, not only to look presentable, but as I shared about the healthy and safety of our schools. Tonight, I'd like to extend thanks to all our vendors who have also become key partners in achieving this goal. As we've implemented in the past, now has become customary. In a moment, I'm going to be asking Mr. Gray to present a facilities update of all the work that's happened over the summer. And lastly, we are still negotiating with our school monitors and administrative assistants and paraprofessionals. That is still going on. We have a tentative agreement with our cafeterias, which will be going to executive session. But other than that, we look forward to a great year. And we want to thank our parents and our students so far. It's been really a great start, especially as we've come back from the pandemic. Regarding the pandemic and the virus, a lot of schools talked about communication. You know, it's not going anywhere. Students are going to get sick, staff are going to get sick, but we still have our dashboard up for anyone who's interested. Every Friday that is published of how many people have contracted the virus. And communication will go out to those specific classrooms. We decided to do that this year. It was a question, should we do it, should we not? But I know we've received some feedback from parents that they still are concerned with regards to maybe not themselves, but parents that may be more susceptible, and to share that communication out. But we look forward to it, and we look forward to Mr. Gray presenting in a moment of all the facilities update that have occurred.
Very well. Are there any questions for Dr. Scarpetti? Betty?
Thank you, Dr. Scarpetti. I'm delighted to hear that everything's gone so smoothly. One question with the less restrictive measures, does that mean children are all eating lunch in the cafeteria? They can go out to recess with other friends, or are we still cohorting?
They are going to lunch, they're going outside, so the restrictions that we've had in the past, for the most part, have totally gone away. Again, we are asking parents and staff, if you're not feeling well, please don't come to school. They will take a test, meaning a COVID test to do that. But again, it's the weather and the season that people are starting to get sick. And we just want to make sure they communicate it, and they've done a great job in the past of communicating that too.
Thank you.
Anyone else for Dr. Scarpetti? Very well. Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Gray.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to be presenting, as Dr. Scarpetti said, a short report about our facilities, some of the projects that happened this summer, and some work that is ongoing, and how we prepared for the opening of our school year. So just as Dr. Scarpetti said, I first want to acknowledge our staff who worked tremendously hard this summer. The schedule was very tight, having 2 buildings servicing students for summer learning programs. So I really want to take the time to acknowledge our custodial staff. We do have 2 custodians in each building. For those of you who don't know, we have an AM custodian and a PM custodian. At Marielle Tracy School, we have Dean Manley and James Walker. Peck Place School, we have Joe Spargo and Chris Polimas. At Racebrook School, we have Steve Shumansky and Jeff Skronsky. And then at Turkey Hill School, we have Kathy Manley and Sean Murray. Great team this summer. As Dr. Scarpetti has mentioned in the past, we started something a couple of years ago where summer cleaning is done as a team. We all go to one school, we all clean together, we follow the same procedure. It's very consistent. It's a much more efficient process as well. I also want to acknowledge our part-time utility custodian, Dave Barton. Dave wears several hats. Dave is a fill-in when a custodian is absent. He does courier services for our district, and he helps out at the buildings when he has time as well. And then we have our supervisor of maintenance and custodians, Joe Mateus, who does all of our maintenance, whether it's preventive or reactive maintenance, and then he also oversees the custodians on a daily basis. Several goals that we have for the facilities and maintenance in the district. The first one being obviously maintaining a safe and clean environment for our students and staff in all of our buildings each and every day. Using our resources effectively and efficiently, establishing and implementing an effective preventive maintenance program, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a future slide, and then developing our capital plan needs for our buildings to make sure that they're safe and they look good. And then we have established priorities for how we respond to calls for maintenance service or custodial service. Emergencies obviously being the #1 priority. This is a situation where it could cause a closure of schools, so that might be something where, I hate to say it, but a water leak somewhere, a fire, a power outage. See some people rolling their eyes, knock on wood. But those are emergency situations. Those take priority over everything. Then we have safety situations come next. That could be something such as exposed wires from a broken outlet cover, broken glass, broken furniture, something of that nature that could pose a risk of injury if it's not dealt with immediately. The next 2 go hand in hand, preventive maintenance and reactive maintenance. So preventive maintenance is what hopefully many of us do with our vehicles. We take them in for regular maintenance so that we don't have those big repairs that pop up on us. where a timing belt goes, which costs $1,200. So you take it in every 5 to 10,000 miles for its checkup. We do that with all of our equipment here, and that reduces the amount of reactive maintenance. Reactive maintenance is when something breaks down, whether it's a system in the buildings or a piece of equipment that you weren't ready for. By instituting a preventive maintenance plan, and we reviewed that back at our Buildings and Grounds meeting last week, by instituting that and having regular procedures and processes for going through your equipment and your machinery, you're checking up on that. You're changing belts, you're looking at motors, you're lubing the bearings in the motors. And as you're doing this, you're going to notice if there's a problem arising, and hopefully you can take care of it before it becomes a big problem. So we're still at a point right now, we want our preventive maintenance to be the bulk of what our maintenance person does. We're still at a point where reactive is a little bit more than the preventive maintenance. We're still playing a little bit of catch up, but I think we're starting to get to the point where in the next year or so, we're gonna turn the tide and it's gonna be more time spent on the preventive maintenance than it is on the reactive. You're still gonna have things that come up. Things are going to break down unexpectedly, even when you give it the best of care, but we're hoping to flip that to more preventive and less reactive. And then finally, event support, so that's just completing setup and breakdown of whether it's school activities or PTA, PTO events. Next is our summer cleaning protocols. Again, I think we've said this several times in meetings, but our custodians have done a great job. They do top to bottom procedure, and that basically is really starting at the light fixtures. They clean all the lenses, they change the bulbs that need to be changed, they work their ways down the walls, they dust the walls off, they clean countertops, cabinets as they work their way down. They get to the furniture, they wipe down all the furniture. Believe it or not, every chair and every desk gets wiped down before it gets put back in the rooms. And then we take care of the floors. So we have several types of floors. We have the wood floor here. We have tile floor, terrazzo floor, VCT tiles, which are the square tiles that you see. Usually it's linoleum in a kitchen, but we have that in many of our classrooms. And then LVT, which is luxury vinyl tile. We have that in the board offices here, some at Racebrook School, some here at Marielle Tracy School, and we're looking to expand that to any carpeted areas in the building. And we do have some carpet. This is done in all the rooms of every building, classrooms, offices, the health suites, the cafeterias, the kitchens, gymnasiums. Every single room gets done in a building before we move to the next building. And then during the school year, obviously, we're going to continue cleaning and sanitizing as we normally do, as well as wiping down those high-touch areas, you know, your printers in the common rooms and doorknobs. Once the classrooms have been cleaned, our custodians then take the furniture that was put into the halls, they put it back into the classrooms. Every teacher leaves a diagram at the end of the school year before they leave for the summer, so it gets put back exactly where they want it. And you can see several of the rooms here that are ready to go right at the end of August here. So getting into the HVAC system, preparing for opening of school, we've aligned our mechanical schedule to the guidelines of Adapt, Advance, Achieve document that came out at the beginning of the pandemic, along with guidance from the Department of Public Health. And there was something they called the Covert protocol for HVAC systems. And what that is 2 hours prior to occupancy of the buildings, the HVAC comes on and it flushes all the air in all the classrooms and all the rooms and offices in the building. It runs all day long, and then it runs 2 hours beyond occupancy. So for all intents and purposes, from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, our HVAC systems are moving the air through the buildings. Tied to that is the filter change that we do. So we just did one just in the middle of August, and I'll talk about that on another slide as well. So when we do our filter changes, we do those for every single univent. If you look in the middle of the univentilator, that's a picture of what you might find in a classroom. So those univentilators in most of the schools provide heat. At Peck Place, they actually provide heat. They're a split system. They provide heat and air conditioning. But inside there are 2 filters that get changed every 3 months. We have air handlers on the lower left-hand side. This room up here that makes a lot of noise, we have 2 of them in there. And then our rooftop units on all of our buildings have filters in them. So every 3 months or so, give or take a week or two, we do go around, our contractor comes out, and they change all of those filters. And we'll continue doing that this year. Some of the projects. The installation of new rooftop units here at Marielle Tracy School. Thanks to capital funding from the town, we'll be replacing several of the rooftop units just outside the window here of this boardroom. The work is scheduled actually to take place the weekend of Columbus Day. It's actually supposed to take place on Columbus Indigenous Peoples' Day because we have a crane coming in to crane 4 different units up onto the roof, so need to do that when no one's around. The units actually have been on order since the end of April and are just coming off the assembly line next week. We hope to have them the following week after that, and then we'll be installing them, like I said, on the Monday when no one's here. So that's, again, through funding from the town, and that's 2 rooftop units and 2 condensing units. Those units serve the cafeteria and office spaces for Marielle Tracy, and the other serves this room and the board offices below us. Projects that took place this summer, again, funded through the town capital plan. This is Turkey Hill School, and this is a continuation of work performed several years ago at Turkey Hill School. The ceiling tiles in many of the classrooms were sagging and were not fitting properly into the ceiling grid. And you look in that first picture there, you can see the tiles. Full classrooms looked like that. The next 2 pictures, they had removed all the tiles. This is what it looked like. And then this is after they put the tiles in. You can see how much more it even brightens up the room. It's a less aggressive texture to the tile, so it doesn't collect as much dust and dirt either. And it's not as heavy, so it shouldn't droop the way the last set did. So again, thank you to the town for funding this for us. The next project was the walking track at Turkey Hill School. Previously, there had been a track that consisted of stone dust, and it was put in by the Turkey Hill School Fathers Club probably 12 years ago, 14 years ago. And when it rained heavily, the track would get rutted. There was runoff, and it would put ruts in the track, and I would have to call Chris Small with the Park and Rec Department, and he was always great about coming out and regrading it for us, but it kept happening, and it created an uneven surface and wasn't so safe for PE classes and students during recess. So the Turkey Hill School PTO decided with the school to raise some money, and on behalf of the families and students, they paved the track, and now they have a nice, flat, even surface to conduct their PE classes and use during recess, and it actually gets a lot of use from the public. The day it was paved, I went back in the afternoon just to look at it. I was nervous because it was still really warm out. I didn't want people on skateboards on there or anything, and there were a couple people already jogging on it, but by then it was hard enough for them to be on it, so it's getting a lot of use already. So thank you to the Turkey Hill PTO for that. The next project this summer was over at Racebrook School, and these are pictures of the 6th grade wing. The 6th grade wing was added on in 2006, was opened in 2007 for students. And what ended up happening here was we had the VCT tile, which are the 12 by 12 tiles. And you can see it was put down with minimal prep underneath and was adhered right to plywood. And the glue does not work well when it's applied right to plywood. The plywood will suck up the glue over time, and what ends up happening is the tiles start popping, and by the end of last year, we had dozens of tiles just coming up. So we were lucky enough again to get some funding from the town, and this time we did a little more with the prep. So the first thing we did was the company came in, they took out all of the tile that was there, they cleaned the floor. They used a patching and skimming compound to patch all the joints, all the screw holes, and all the seams in the plywood. And then they come back over that and they use a cement-based underlayment, and that basically levels out the floor. So you have a nice clean, level surface to adhere the flooring to. And this is a picture once the tile's been installed. I will say, I'm not great with picking out colors. I usually have my wife pick out my shirts, my ties to match my shirts, but I did pick out these colors, and I'm proud of it. They're so bland. Basically, they match what I usually wear, khaki pants and a blue shirt. So it was easy. Anyway, this is the floors after they were waxed, just prior to the furniture being placed back in the classrooms. So the flooring came out really nice. Buildings and Grounds Committee actually went in before this all took place and saw the before, and then was able to last week go and take a walk through to see the difference of the floors. Finally, the restriping of the Marielle Tracy parking lot. This was done to improve the safety and the flow of traffic coming in and out of the Mary Tracy parking lot. So we've gotten a lot more traffic recently in this parking lot. So to make it a little bit easier for everyone and make the flow of traffic go, Dr. Scarpetti had some ideas about really putting in some larger block letter to show the messaging of where we enter and where we exit, because we were having cars going in the wrong way, which was unsafe. The crosswalk was starting to fade, so we wanted to redo that as well, because that is a public road that unfortunately cuts through the parking lot. And we do have families going back and forth. So we did restripe. We did make the front loop buses only. You can see we have an exit only, we have an enter only with some big arrows. We were able to achieve getting a handicap spot in the main parking lot that didn't previously exist right next to the crosswalk. That's not just one lonely arrow in the parking lot. There are several of those. They direct the flow of traffic down the aisles, so people aren't going toward each other in an aisle. All traffic flows to the left if you're looking at the parking lot. And then the crosswalk again on Schoolhouse, which is a public road, so we want to make sure people are safe crossing that road. And our SSO in the morning does a great job with helping there as well. And again, just to end, you know, our goals for our facilities department and maintenance is to maintain a safe and clean environment for all the people in our buildings, students, staff, families that are visiting. We want our buildings to look presentable as well, using those resources effectively and efficiently, establishing that preventive maintenance program so we're doing less of the reactive, and then finally developing the capital plan. So thank you, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Gray? Go ahead, Mr. Ziman.
It's not really a question. I just wanted to compliment Dr. Scarpetti on putting Mr. Gray in this current position, because I think much as we miss him in our schools, his contribution to our school system now is obvious.
Thank you. Anyone else for Mr. Gray? Tatiana?
Mr. Gray, that area you just talked about in front of Marielle Tracy where it's buses only, in the morning when parents are dropping off, is that area restricted for the cars to go in, or is it only when the buses come?
So we have the cars coming out on the outside part of the island, and it is for buses only to come up.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else for Mr. Gray? Very well. Mr. Gray, you'd like to move on to your next report?
Sure, give me just one quick second to pull that up. So I do have a little bit more for facilities if you'd like before I go to finance.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So again, just with the HVAC system, we did just change all of our filters, and we will be doing that every 3 months throughout the year, basically with every change of season. So when the heating season hits right around the end of October, early November, we'll be changing our filters again. I did want to make you all aware our Fire Marshal Jamie Vincent and Deputy Fire Marshal Tim Borer were on site for annual back-to-school inspections of our school buildings. We did very well with our inspections, nothing major. There were a few maintenance issues, sticking doors and things like that that Joe Mateus will be taking care of. But I also wanted to let you know that during these inspections, it's every single room, every nook and cranny in the building that they check to make sure that we're adhering to fire codes. So I do want to thank Fire Marshal Vincent and Deputy Fire Marshal Borer, because we do have a great relationship, and I think we've done a really good job of getting our buildings up to code, and we rarely have any violations. Again, it's mostly maintenance type issues that we have. So again, another town department that we've all developed good relationships with. So and then finally, sprinkler system here at Marielle Tracy School. We have our sprinkler systems inspected every summer. That's one of our contracts that we have. And this summer, when Marielle Tracy was being inspected, it was determined that we needed a 5-year internal inspection of our sprinkler system. And what that entails is they come in, they check all the valves, and they open them up. They take parts of them apart. They look inside to make sure they're functioning properly. This is all done down in the basement. That was just done the other day. There were no issues. Everything is working fine, so we're up to date on that. So those were the updates for facilities.
Again, any questions for Mr. Gray? Very well. You want to move on to your next report?
Sure.
Thanks.
Finance update. An update on the grants. So we have our American Rescue Plan, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Rescue Plan 3 grant, ARP ESSER 3. The original allocation for that grant was $326,181. To date, we have spent $192,381 with $133,800 remaining. And most of that has already been spent on salaries, services, and supplies for our 2021 and 2022 summer learning programs. We have until September of '24 to expend the rest of that money, by the way. Our ESSER 2 fund, we had an original allocation of $164,053. We've expended $161,479. We have $2,574 remaining. Again, this is for salaries, services, and supplies for 21 and 22 summer learning programs. We have the American Rescue Plan Individuals with Disabilities Education Act 611 and 619 grant. And there's $72,291 allocation for that grant. $43,511 was expended. $29,410 remain. That has been used for special education stipends and professional development around restorative practices. And then finally, our ESSER 2 special education grant, an allocation of $60,200, $39,700 to date has been expended, and $20,500 remain. And job-embedded professional development, coaching, tutoring, modeling, and co-teaching have been where that money has been spent. I know I went through that really quickly. The chart that I just read off of was actually in the board update this past month, so if you wanted to go back and look through, please feel free to do so. Believe it or not, the 23-24 budget process has already begun. That's something Dr. Scarpetti and I probably start talking about in May of every year once the budget passes. And we will be passing out the budget forms to all the department heads and the principals next week. So they'll be formulating their budgets and turning those in October at some point, and then we'll really start getting into the thick of the budget process. In food services, I'm just going to refresh your memories from last month. The state of Connecticut General Assembly allocated $30 million to the Connecticut Department of Education for free school meals for children, and they titled it School Meals Assistance Revenue for Transition. These are funds that will allow the school food authorities to continue to provide meals at no cost for a longer duration of time while we allow parents to adjust back to charging for lunches again. Orange received $194,557. It's estimated that this will get us to probably December, maybe early January, without charging families before we have to go back to charging. We will be communicating with families when that is going to happen. With that said, despite that lunch is free for all students, we did send out the letters to households that automatically qualify for free or reduced lunch. If a family has not received a letter but believes they might qualify, they are encouraged to submit an application, and that can be found at the OESS website. Anybody who thinks they may qualify can put that in anytime throughout the year, and we do encourage them to do so. And finally, the audit. The 2021-22 Educational Financial System Reporting, which is statutorily due on September 1st of every year for the Orange School District, was completed and certified by Dr. Scarpetti and was sent ahead of that deadline, I'm happy to report. So we're all set with our Educational Financial System Reporting. And the auditors were recently back at central office last week to work in our payroll department. They got all of the paperwork they needed and questions answered, so we're well on the way in our audit process as well. And that concludes the finance report.
Any questions for Mr. Gray on that? Go ahead, Annette.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Do you anticipate any increase in lunch costs for families once our allocation runs out?
So it's interesting that you asked that question. We were actually given a waiver not to increase because usually we do have to increase from year to year, but we were given a waiver not to increase. So the price is most likely going to remain what it was before pre-pandemic, before we were giving free lunches.
One more thing, and maybe this isn't the right time to ask it, is the after-school program have a full attendance, or is there an increase in number of students attending the after-school program this year?
So I will say, we did discuss that at Finance Subcommittee, and the numbers are a lot higher than they have been in the past year.
So we're getting back to normal.
We're getting close to normal, yes.
Okay, and is there an increase in the cost of that for families?
Again, they're recognizing the need for some families transitioning during this time. We did not increase that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe Susan will give you an update on the numbers in her 21st century. Annette?
Is there a chance that the state might extend the lunch?
So there has been discussion about that. There's nothing definitive, but there has been discussion that it may be extended.
And then looking at the, all of the grants, do you roughly know percentage-wise around how much of that we've spent on additional staffing?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that.
Okay.
A lot
I
of
was just
that is
wondering.
used for staffing in the summer learning program, for salaries for staff for summer learning. But I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else for Mr. Gray? Nope. Very well. Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Thank you.
Dr. Russo?
Good evening. I'll start my update with some September highlights of our professional learning calendar. This was shared with all teachers, as mentioned at the last board meeting, and it was shared in the board update with all of you. If you're interested, you can see that on slide 3 of the professional learning calendar, and we are excited that tomorrow we begin with some grade level teams, grade 6 in the morning, grade 5 in the afternoon. On the 22nd, grade 3 teachers in the morning, grade 4 teachers in the afternoon. On September 28th, grade 2 teachers in the morning, and grade 1 teachers in the afternoon. And then on September 29th, the kindergarten teachers will meet. And what will they be doing? They'll be focusing on math units, which will be facilitated by our math specialists at each of the schools. So they'll be school-based. In addition, the math specialists have been working on creating learning targets. So we've done a really great job of having explicit lessons. We just want to make sure that they're systematic. And in addition to now creating those learning targets for the units for all the grade levels, we're really working on common language and vocabulary with different resources, because since we do provide our teachers the opportunities to use different resources instead of just one program, if, for example, they use a resource from Georgia Math, sometimes the concepts are described with certain vocabulary, which may be different from Engage New York or a Math Expressions or another resource. And so we really looked at all of the vocabulary in those resources, and we've got a nice common language with high leverage strategies instead of a ton. So we're excited for the math specialists to facilitate those sessions with our teachers. And oh yes, we will also provide teachers with the opportunities to work on operational curriculum, different from intended curriculum, on their teacher maps. So in our consensus district map, we've identified, what's required, where consistency is necessary or required, and then where flexibility is important. And so that's where teacher decisions and choices based on the students who are in front of them comes in. And so we want to capture that, and they're going to think about putting that in their teacher maps. Then this Wednesday, the 21st, is our first Curriculum Wednesday, and on that day, we are going to, in grade levels, revisit the standards that we prioritized for reporting. So, for example, a math unit may have 4 standards with several parts. It could be like 15 parts for those 4 standards. We don't, on a legal document, report on all of the assessment. Every unit, we guarantee that we're going to teach and assess all the standards, but on a report card, we just prioritize 1 or 2 for reporting. So the teachers are all going to look to see what they've reported on in the past, provide feedback to see if we need to revise anything before the marking period. Then once we have identified, and we changed the name to reporting standards because all the standards are important. But once they have a consensus about what we're going to report on, we want to make sure that we have sufficient items for the tasks and for the evidence of those standards. So we hope that that'll be an exciting day for us, and they'll be able to have all this ready before the marking period ends. And of course, they can collect this information all along. As soon as a student demonstrates all parts of a standard, you can already provide that grade. And so it's all ready. It doesn't have to happen just at the end of the year. So those are some of the highlights that you can find on slide 3. At the beginning of the year, all teachers reviewed with the principals what assessments or universal screens we would be relying on to collect our information for our SRBI meetings, and then information, 1 data point to triangulate with all other information, like classroom daily performance and unit performance. So the universal screens, and then for students who took the SBA last year, we also in our data team meetings have unpacked, who's at standard, who needs to work on certain standards, and just coming up with a plan for every student to succeed. As we mentioned at the last board meeting, we were spending time developing relationships, defining structures in classrooms, and this week we officially start our curriculum. The SBA assessment, the individual paper student scores were sent to the district, and these were shared with the schools on September 5th, and they disseminated these results to families. We were excited to submit an ARP-ESSER competitive innovative after-school grant on September 4th. And this is an opportunity to partner with I'm looking at Tricia, because she does so much work with the 21st century, but partner with 21st Century as a collaborative partner organization. And we feel that from all of the great experiences from 21st Century and summer learning, we can extend innovative opportunities to our students all year long after school. So we did share in the board update excerpts or notes from descriptions and sections that we submitted in that grant. So, Mary, when do we know about that?
Supposed to be by the end of September.
Okay, so.
That's not always the case.
So we'll keep you posted. And of course, we'll go into greater detail with all these pieces with the curriculum subcommittee. There were some nice updates to the Renaissance, like grammar added to the Freckle ELA, Nearpod, which some of our teachers used, and really a few other things, but we'll go into those with the members of the curriculum subcommittee. And finally, we are still working on posting our curriculum on the website, stage one of what's on Rubicon Atlas. Oh, and one final thing. Our teachers have all been busy with their trainings on that GCN, or Global Compliance Network. As of 9/22, right around the corner this week, they will have finished the DCF, which is the Department of Children and Families Connecticut mandated reporter training, the anti-bullying Connecticut state mandated tutorial, the anaphylaxis and anaphylactic shock tutorial, bloodborne pathogens, and our emergency response plan video. All that's left is the sexual harassment mandated tutorial, which will be completed by the 7th of October. And Mr. Kraut, that concludes my report.
Very well. Any questions? Go ahead, Tatiana.
Good evening, Dr. Russo. When you say innovative ideas when it comes to 21st centuries, are there certain activities that the children are participating in at 21st Century? And is it universal across the 3 elementary schools?
So that's a great question. We always want to provide the opportunity for school identity. So just like in our curriculum, there may be some differences because of who's in front of you and what that group wants. But we do try to, if a school is interested in something, to try to keep it equal. So there are certain activities that 21st Century currently provides that we could now enhance and provide more. So the idea of theater is one example, and there are several. And we did write a lot of those down in the notes. So it's really just expanding and then providing the opportunity for a late bus. So for families that, maybe they just have one car, or they don't have anybody who can pick the children up from, one of the sessions, we put in to have some transportation for that.
So these are ideas that are expanding but are not being done at the moment, is
No,
that
and
right?
there's no competition between 21st Century and this innovative after-school program. It's just to enhance. And like 21st Century, the activities from this grant are available for all students who attend 21st Century or students who don't attend 21st Century.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else for Dr. Russo? Betty?
Dr. Russo, you mentioned the reporting standards that are being reviewed or determined. Will those meetings of teachers, will that affect the current report card so that it might be adjusted to include just those standards and remove some other standards that are on the report card?
Yes,
And you think that'll be done in time for the,
definitely. We've got this so under control.
Okay, all right.
We
Okay.
built it so that it could be flexible.
Okay.
So there's an overarching category,
Mm-hmm.
and then the standards fall under that category. We will have to create new screencasts for parents, and
Yeah.
we'll have to update the standards that were selected so that they're aware. But, this is a perfect opportunity to remind everyone that a report card is not the only, and certainly not the best way to communicate student progress, because, we're just identifying,
Right.
One
One
or two
moment in
standards,
time,
right,
right.
of an entire unit's standards. And so that's why the teacher-parent conferences are so important.
Right.
The emails, the conversations, the phone calls that go on between a teacher and a family.
and one other thing, you mentioned the Hvac information going out to families. Will there be a report to the board at some point about how our district did?
So we did include for the board all of our results. I believe it was in last month's board update. And when we meet with the curriculum subcommittee, we were going to go over everything first, like we always do. We go over with the members of the curriculum subcommittee, and then we have a discussion whether we're going to have a presentation for the full board. But we did share all those results already.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you, Doctor.
My pleasure.
Mrs. Ito.
Good evening. Our special education department has been working through the challenges of the Connecticut Special Education Data System, or otherwise known as CT-SEDS. As a reminder, this is the new Connecticut mandated IEP and Section 504 writing platform. As a district, 8 staff and I have participated in the training of the trainers. This team of trainers have collaborated across the district, within BOA, and other members throughout the state to troubleshoot through finalizing the written individual education plan and Section 504 documents. It's important to note that the new CT-SEDS process has not caused any interruption in implementing the developed plans. Families of children receiving special education services have received an email from me with information to support them in understanding their child's IEP or Section 504 and the parent portal that is part of CT-SEDS. We have not enabled the parent portal at this time as the state is continuing to work on parent contact information within the system. Information related to the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, or CPAT, was also included in this communication. Families can log into our district website at oess.org or go directly to the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center at cpatinc.org for information that this organization is providing to support families through this process. Any families having questions about their child's plan are encouraged to contact the school directly, but of course, I'm always here to support. And that's the end of my report.
Questions for Mrs. Ito? Go ahead, Sue.
Good evening, Ms. Zito.
Good
Thank you
evening.
for your report. Question about the new reporting. I know that as students' IEP meetings or 504 meetings are coming up, they're getting entered in, is my understanding. How have they been going? Is it easier? Is it harder? People like it? Like, what's the feel so far?
There are, to be quite honest, a lot of glitches within the system and understanding, navigating the system that the state and PCG and the RESCs are really working with districts to try to help get through that. So right now, there's a lot of a learning curve going on, but we have a great team of people who have been very persistent
Good.
through working out the challenges. And I do find that sometimes sitting side by side or working collaboratively as a team to troubleshoot, which is why I mentioned BOA and I mentioned working through with the state as well as across the district has been really helpful as we get through the early stages of the process. But we have successfully finalized a few IEPs, so yay.
And one of the reasons why I asked is because with ACES, we were also hearing that it's going to make things much easier, but it's as each one happens,
Yes.
you're finding different things along the way. So
Correct.
it sounds like, everybody's in it together.
We are, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for Mrs. Ito? Very well, thank you, Mrs. Ito. Dr. Scarpetti, I do believe you have an introduction to make.
We're only working with one mic tonight. And before I do an introduction, Mr. Kraut, just to follow up on a few questions that some board members asked. Again, yes, smarter balanced assessment scores are accessible, and actually through the state website too. I think that it's important to remind everyone, it could encapsulate a general group, and especially going through the pandemic, but the work that's being done in the school is just beginning. And so looking at that data, having the data teams look at it, And specifically looking at the longitudinal data of a specific student is where the work begins and where the work ends. To see that growth, especially the impact of what has occurred, if there is a gap that has occurred during the pandemic. It's a little bit of a bridge to what Mrs. Messina Mullen just asked too about 21st century, about these innovative. Again, I'm glad that that at times, even for myself, we forget where we were in the past 2 years. But the innovation stopped during 21st century because typically we would bring people in, and it may be site-specific, but typically karate would be offered to all the schools. Cooking would be offered to all the schools. So we're excited, as I shared earlier, to get back to that. But hopefully with this grant, it will have less impact on parents financially where it could be accessible at the cost of this grant. So just wanted to follow up on those few things. I couldn't chime in without my mic here. And I appreciate Mr. Zyman acknowledging Mr. Gray's work in his transition. And again, it's a nice transition to announcing the new principal at Marielle Tracy. Many of us are in leadership positions or have read, and if you have overseen a group of people, there's a statement, it's all who you hire. Now, besides Mr. Gray's keen sense of interior design and his khakis and blue shirt, it's nice that collaboration with other districts that opened a position like we created here is tying that educational background and the structural background. I have to say personally, when I look to hire someone, it's not just about what we could do and the feedback and the creativeness and the innovation and the work ethic, but I actually look at what I could learn from someone. And if I may, I'd like to read a little bit background about Mrs. Watson, the new principal of MLT. As all of you are aware, the board appointed her last month, and again this month we want to acknowledge her. Elaine holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and a Master of Science in Reading and a 6-year in Education Leadership. She was a graduate fellow at SUNY Albany at the Center for Educational Research and Policy Studies and received the highest academic award from Sacred Heart University for postgraduate studies. She's been a classroom teacher, a reading consultant, curriculum developer, interim principal, and assistant superintendent. She has worked closely with the Haskins Laboratory and its associated colleagues to improve early literacy instruction. And again, that is so important at that level that we've hired Elaine. Let me get my spot here. In addition to that, one thing that you may have heard of Mrs. Watson's name is because she served as the interim principal at Racebrook School during that time when, quite honestly, Mr. Gray was transitioning to his new position, and we were incredibly grateful for the service that she provided to us. And as Dr. Russo mentioned, she mentioned Mrs. Lasso's in the audience, but I also like to acknowledge a few of the people. All our principals are here, Mrs. Lasso, Mrs. McNeil, and Dr. Arterberry in support. Also, we have Mr. Watson supporting his wife, her daughter Olivia, and her husband. And Olivia's actually expecting, I don't know if, is it your first child, Olivia? Olivia, so.
No, everybody in orange.
Yeah, everyone in noise. So I share that with you with this because I think all of you know this, but I wanted to make sure Mrs. Watson, it's not only joined the MLT family, but it's the Orange community, and it's such a great community that is here, as you already know, and I think why you actually applied for the position as you got that experience as an interim. But if all of you could join me in welcoming Mrs. Watson as the MLT principal. And then, yep. I think Elaine wants to say a few words to the board. And the mic just has to be on green if it's not.
It's on green. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Scarpetti. During the 2021 school year, I had the opportunity to serve as the interim principal of Racebrook School. While I was there, I learned how wonderful the Orange School District is. It is a district that is embraced by its community and together share a common vision, which is to provide the best educational experience for its students. It is also evident that the district and the community embrace the families, the staff, and the teachers by fostering a relationship with an administration that is supportive, caring, and purposeful. When the opportunity of the principalship of Marielle Tracy became available, it was not a hard decision to choose to apply. Marielle Tracy is a wonderful school with a rich history. The building is alive with the energy of preschoolers and kindergartners who are embarking on the wonderful world of learning. It is with great joy that I serve as its principal, and I'm honored that you have given me the privilege to serve. Thank you. And I also want to add that I was deeply touched, and I didn't know that my colleagues would be here. And I just want to say how warm and embracing they are, and they share so much. It's such a wonderful collegial experience. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Scarpetti.
Thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Yes, welcome. So I think at this time, Mr. Ziman, one of your favorite things, we're going to take a slight break and have a little cake to celebrate our new principal. All right, so we'll see you back here probably about 8:15 or so. All right, so we're going to take a little recess. Thanks. Very well, thank you very much. So we're back, and we are going to take a look at board business. I need board business, consider and act on the 2023 Orange Board of Education meeting dates. I'm sure you all have seen the dates that I'm talking about here. It's crazy that I'm looking at January 2024. That's
23 and 24.
yeah, that's really not correct, but anyhow. So I'll be looking for a motion to accept the 2023 Orange Board of Education meeting dates as presented. Do I have a motion? Mr. Ziman, second. Ronette? Any discussion, questions about any of the dates, anything? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Very well, thank you. Policy, second read, 5142.4, school security officers. I am looking for a motion to accept policy 5142.4 as presented. Do I have a motion? Mr. Ken, Susan, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? I would just like to make a quick comment to thank you, Betty, and the policy committee for getting right on this for us and going through it carefully the way you did, spending the time on it. Appreciate the time that you put into it and how quickly you and your committee acted on it. Thank you very much. Okay, where are we now? Standing committees. Finance and Operations, Ms. Riccio.
Thank you, Mr. Kraut. Finance Subcommittee met prior to this meeting. Mr. Gray did a fantastic job of explaining the finances in his presentation. A couple things to note. I know there was a question about 21st Century. I want to be really clear that 21st Century is a separate entity from the Board of Education. We are not funded by the Board of Education. We are a tuition-based entity. And the only reason why we're involved is because it's at our schools. So we put somebody like me, who oversees 21st, just to keep an arm in to see what's happening. There's no money transacted between the two. So when we talk about the grant that will enhance 21st Century, Dr. Russo, I really appreciate all your support with Mrs. Lasto, but that's an enhancement. That's not something that we're infusing from the school, although we'll leverage some of those things. So this is a separate entity. And as a result, I wanted to share some of the numbers from 21st Century. Mr. Gray, if you could send it out to the entire board, the chart you shared with us in finance, that would be helpful. Just as a summary basis, I want you to think about this for a minute. Last June of 2022, we only had a total of 93 students in our morning session. That's it, for all three schools. In September of 2022, we now have 173 students in the morning session, almost double, right? For the afternoon, 452 in the afternoon seats, and then in September of 2022, there's 902, also just about doubled. The numbers are enormous when you look at how many seats we have. It's not necessarily students, but it's seats. So one student sits in a seat 5 days at 21st Century, if they do. That would be considered 5 seats. Some students may only be there 1 or 2 days, 3 days, whatever. So, or 2, 3, or 4 days. So just recognize that these are not actual kids in seats. They're actually children in seats, and we count seats because it's number of days. It's kind of a weird calculation if you're not familiar with it, but just so you know, we're getting back to pre-COVID numbers, which is huge. And so the 21st Century is looking into whether or not they need additional staffing, and they very well may be. So we want to maintain, 21st Century always wants to maintain about a 12 to 14 student to a instructor. So they'll maintain that. They're doing really well. Lots of good stuff going on. So I just wanted to call that out because I don't want parents or anybody who's watching this to not understand that this is, 21st Century is separate from the Orange Board of Ed. We just, because again, it's our students and it's in our buildings, we like to keep an eye on it, kind of thing. Let's see, the only other thing I was going to mention from the board meeting is I'm super happy that the audit is going well and it's early. And I also wanted to just remind the board members that very soon we're going to be going back to budget season. Mr. Gray mentioned that he's already starting to send out information to the appropriate stakeholders. So think about that one. I know you'll all be happy about that. That's it. That's it for this part.
Any questions for Susan? Any issues that a board member may have regarding the budget season, it's Mr. Gray's fault, so direct all your complaints to Mr. Gray, directly to Mr. Gray, just right to him.
Yes?
Just one more question. If a parent has a question about 21st century or has an issue with 21st century, who would they contact? Is it?
Usually you would start with, oh, sorry, mic's
No,
still on.
I don't know. Okay.
Usually you would start with the manager at the site your child is at,
Okay.
and then you would go to Mrs. Lasto because she's over 21st century.
Thank you.
So if it's something that's pertaining to before it, or after it, as the case may be, you have to think about what the hours are. Mrs. Lasto's in charge of 21st, but Dr. Scarpetti would always be a resource as well.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Susan? Very well. Personnel Transportation, Mrs. Hadlock?
The Personnel and Policy Committee has not met since we discussed the school security officers, and I'll be meeting with Dr. Scarpetti this week to talk about future discussions and also to set a date. We don't have a date at this point in time, but we will be getting some dates and sending them out to members of the committee.
Thank you very much. Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Cap?
Good evening, everyone. So our Buildings and Grounds Security and Safety Committee did meet last Wednesday, September 14th. We were greeted by Mr. Gray at Racebrook School, and he gave us a great tour of the school with all the renovations that took place over the summer, which he presented during his slideshow earlier tonight. And then we met afterwards, and we went over pretty much everything he had in this slideshow. One of the highlights, or one of the things I just want to note, is that makes me the most impressed of being on the board here after all these years, is the Preventative Maintenance, I'm going to call it a program, that he's putting together for us. My earlier years here, we had no idea. You know, when something had maintenance done to it, and when it was purchased, and anything, if it even had a warranty. So our committee is very appreciative of that. I know it's a work in progress. You have probably another year or so to put into that, you said, but we appreciate what you're doing on that. And also just, you know, the fire marshal did go through the schools. The custodials did clean everything throughout the summer. So again, that's all I can report on, as everything else was already reported. But thank you. And we will schedule another meeting in the near future to go over additional topics. Thanks.
Very well. Any questions for Mr. Cap? Okay. Curriculum, everyone's favorite. Mr.
Well,
Ziman.
We did not have a meeting, and like policy, we'll be looking for a day next week to try and have one. On a separate issue, I'd like to express my displeasure over the fact that for years, when we've had a microphone check, everybody got to talk about how well their team was doing. And now that the New York Giants are 2-0 and first in their division, we don't do it anymore.
Thank you for your report. I really don't know what to do with him. All right, so let's make a note that Mr. Ziman can check his microphone next meeting? Okay, yeah, we'll see what the record is. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ziman. ACES. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Hold on one moment. No, let's do ACES. Yeah, go ahead. Ms.
Okay,
Riccio.
so the ACES Governing Board met September 8th at our Staff Development Building. Couple things that I wanted to share with you guys. One of them was a really kind of nice tribute. It was a ribbon cutting for a new playground at ACES Village School. And I got to actually speak. I did a short speech because everybody was saying similar things and I didn't want to duplicate. But I did speak, and it was in honor of this woman named Rose Morrow. And she was the assistant principal at Village School and was, just really loved the children and used to watch them out her window. And so a group of people had said they wanted to do something in her honor. She literally had retired and like maybe a few months later passed away, unfortunately. And so people wanted to acknowledge all of her contribution. So they originally started off just trying to do a piece of a playground. And they were going to raise some money. And long and the short of it is that they just kept asking for money and grants and, going to different sources. And Firestone's foundation also donated a significant amount of money. And it's an entire playground now, and it's fantastic. And it was, almost $250,000. Sorry, yeah, almost $250,000. So it was a huge amount that they raised when it was, one or two people made one person made a huge impact on many people that ultimately donated to this thing. So that ribbon cutting was on the 14th, and it's lovely. The other thing I want to note was that ACES did close on the Wintergreen building itself on Wintergreen Avenue. We're not taking, we have ownership of it, but we're not moving in probably until next school year. Currently, Hamden is renting it out, and you may have seen some press about the building. They have access to the full building. They are renting it back from ACES. We bought it from Hamden. Hamden is now renting it back. So there were some issues with where staff was going in the building. They have access to it. So just saying that it wasn't ACES's doing. Well, we allowed it. The other piece is that Early Head Start has met their quota at ACES. They also have a new program called ACES Bridges, Alternate High School and Middle School, that recently opened for students who are no longer able to attend their own schools. It's actually a program. While it doesn't apply to our Orange School District, I just wanted to note it because you never know when somebody might need that. There's quite a few openings at ACES. I guess that's and all of their schools open well. The other piece I wanted to note was ACES has an insurance collaborative, and they've saved in the last 5 years over $1 million. So, it's ACES, there's East Haven is a part of it, Ansonia's a part of it, there's another district that's a part of it also. So I did mention it to Mr. Gray, and he's going to have a discussion with them. I think that's it. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Riccio? Very well. So I will be looking for a motion to enter into executive session to discuss collective bargaining with the cafeteria union. I'd also like to invite Dr. Scarpetti and Mr. Gray. Will you both be attending executive session? Very well. So I need a motion to move into an executive session. Do I have a motion?
Ladies.
Tatiana, second. Betty, any discussion? Opposed? I'm sorry. All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Very well. We are in executive session at 8:32. Thank you. Very good, thank you. So we are back from executive session. The following motion reads, "The Orange Board of Education hereby moves to provide funding for and to otherwise accept and approve the tentative agreement for our successor collective bargaining agreement with the cafeteria union for the period of July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2026. The board further delegates to the chair the authority to execute the final contract document on behalf of the board." Do I have a motion? Susan, do I have a second? Carmen, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Very well. I am looking for a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting. Susan?
Yes.
Mr. Zyman?
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? We are adjourned at 8:51. Thank you very much.
Thank you.